Hey y'all, I'm James Wright. Welcome to my shop, and today we are restoring a Cooper's plane. Yeah, this ain't your normal joiner. Let's dive in and have a little bit of fun. This is a Cooper's plane. It is not your normal jointer plane. You don't actually move this over the work. You actually flip it upside down and you move the work over the plane. So it's actually a bench that happens to have an iron in it. And I got this one for a steal of a deal, but it's missing the legs and the iron and chip breaker. And there's a lot of things we want to address on this, but I want to get this up and running again and turn it into a Cooper's plane again. So a couple problems. Number one, this is not the original iron. It is way too small for this. Even though it is an incredibly large iron, it's not the one that's supposed to go in here. Come loose. Also, this wedge has been reworked and isn't originally from this. You can see the sides are worn down because it's been used with the wrong iron. And this iron is, well, it's an okay iron. It's a great beveled iron, but I want something that's bigger, something that actually fits the slot. So I have this iron, which is actually a little bit too large. It's a 3-inch wide iron, and this would be about what's originally in there. With the cap iron and the wedged iron, this should be really nice, but it's just a hair too big. So we have to do some modifications on that, and then we have to do a little bit of modification for the screw to fit in here. And then once we have that all get in, we'll make a new wedge, and I'll do the carving to match it, and we're gonna make this whole thing new and get up and running again.
First thing we need to do is widen this mouth, only by a tiny bit, about a 1/16 inch total. So I'm going to take a little bit off of one side and a little bit off the other side. I have a nice collection of Plane Maker's floats. These make this type of work so fast and easy. And to make this one, I'm going to cut a slot at the front and back, and then kind of even it out with a file in between.
A little bit of work, and that's what I'm looking for, just that little bit of slop.
Next, the bed for the iron needs some work. It has some junk on it and it's just uneven. So I'm going to come in with some Plane Maker's floats and a curved tooth file and smooth that out. After that, there's a little bit of detail that has to go here and there for the cheeks and just those tiny little things that make everything look better. And then we can actually start working on fitting it. We have to fit the screw into the slot. This is probably the third time this slot has been cut for a screw. So it's kind of an interesting piece of history in here.
So now that is no longer big enough and the angle is all wrong. So let's fix that.
The new wedge I'm going to be making out of this piece of Victorian blackwood. It's an Australian wood, incredibly hard, incredibly dense, and will work very well on this. The plane body itself is made out of American beech, which is pretty hard, but it's not this hard, and so having a nice comparison between those two will work out well. We're going to cut it down to length and then cut it to width, and then we've got this block we can come in and smooth it out and get it to, I'm going to make it slightly wider than it needs to be, slightly wider in the mouth so I can come back in and smooth it out in the end. Once we get the rough block shape, then we need to actually figure out what angle does this wedge need to be. So I'm actually going to grab this and I'm an eyeball. I want it to be about that angle. I don't need it to be that long. I just need a little piece to wedge in there. And this one I'm going to get eyeballed close to where I want it to be, and then I'm going to fit it in and see, yeah, that one needs a little bit more work. And then I can come back and adjust it again until I get a nice tight fit that actually wedges it in there and matches both the cheek and the iron. We need to cut the tip off it because we don't want it to come to a full tip and go all the way down. We're actually going to stop it a bit short. So this is going to be the profile for the sides of the wedge. And I want to true up and clean up the edge before we go any farther. I want to make sure that everything on this is square and true because we're going to be marking off of it. Then we can bring in this template we made and trace it on both sides and then connect the dots from one side to the other. This will give us the angle at which it needs to come down. To remove most of that waste in the angle, I'm going to use a scrub plane and rough it down. This is kind of fun where you can take off big curls. Just keep an eye on both those lines and stay away from it. And when you get close, then come in with the plane and detail it down. I can test it, make sure it's where it needs to be, make sure everything is nice and tight. If there's any adjustments or any budges or things you need to add to it, we can add those now. Now, this comes to a 1/4 inch nose at the end, and we don't want that. We want it to come down to a taper, but only between the cheeks. So we're actually going to create a second wedge in here, but this won't actually wedge into the body. Only the two sides actually wedge into the body. This needs to be an escapement for the chips to come out. So it's going to actually taper from either corner of this so that when the chips come out the mouth, they aren't going to run into anything. Then we can cut down the cheeks of this angle and start removing the waste. I want it to come to a tight line right at the end here, and we're going to cut this off. I want this line to be sharp and very, very accurate. So once we get close with the saw, we're going to come back in with the chisel and make a nice straight line there. And then we're going to connect the dots with the chisel from that top line all the way down to the bottom corner. And I want it to come to a 0 point at the end. So we're going to take off a lot of material with the chisels and make sure that these are nice and sharp, and you can come in and smooth it out and get a really clean surface. Do some work with the file and make sure that this is smooth. All of the chips and curls are going to be coming right past this, so we don't want them to hit anything. Every edge, every corner needs to be nice and smooth so that there's nothing for a wood chip to catch on. So spend your time here and make it up nice. And this is a very, very pleasing step when you get this shape. It's a very traditional shape, and it works incredibly well, and it looks really good. And when you get that nice transition from the iron to the wedge, it's happy. Next up, we need to work on the mouth. On this one, it is really big. It has been flattened several times over the years, and we want to close that back up. And one of the best ways to do that is to put in a little insert. I have this piece of torrefied maple that will work very well for it. This is something with a big plane like this, it's not as necessary, but it's nice. The tighter the mouth you can make, the cleaner the cut you're going to get, and it just makes everything a little bit easier. So I'm going to cut this to roughly the shape I want, put down some double-sided tape, and this will let me put this mouth closer in place, lock it down, and then I can trace around it to know how I want to cut out the mortise that this will fit into. So I can make nice, tight, sharp lines exactly to the shape I want them to be, and then we can start removing it. I'm going to stay away from those lines. You can see the chisel coming in a good 1/16 inch or more away from the line, and I'm not going to do those until I get the whole mortise shaped. I'm just going to stay away from them as long as possible. You want to come in with the chisel bevel down. This will give you the most control and allow you to go all the way down to depth. We can remove most of it with a mallet and tapping it out, but when we come to the edges, we want to take a little more time. When we get close to the depth we want, then we can use a stabbing motion to get it really, really close. The router plane here is, this is where it really shines. It comes in and does a phenomenal job here, giving you a very clean, smooth surface, and you can get it down to exactly the depth you want. Now, I actually want to carve this to be slightly shallower than the thickness of the insert I'm putting in, so that we can smooth off the insert to the bottom of the plane. And so we're adjusting and checking our depth from time to time. Once we get the depth down to the bottom smooth, then we can go right to our line and make sure we get a good, tight, clean fit on this. I'm going to do a test fit on here and make sure everything is the way I want to. I'm going to be using some hide glue. This is actually the Old Brown bottle. I really like this stuff. Normally, I would heat it up in a cup of hot water. I'd put the bottle in that, and it would allow it to spread a little bit easier. But for this one quick application, I don't need it to be easily spreadable, and I'm just going to gloop it in here. The problem with that is I need to actually then press it to make sure that gloop moves around and I don't have big bubbles underneath. So we're going to tap it down into place and then clamp it down. One of the nice things with hide glue is you don't need the clamping pressure as long as it's housed in a joint, but it's advantageous if you're trying to move the glue around and actually flatten it out. Once that's cured, we can come back in and smooth it down. And with a nice smoothing plane, we're going to make that transition exactly where I want. I'm going to be taking off passes from one end to the other. I want to make sure I'm not hitting anything that I don't want to. You'll notice there's several spots where it's low and several places where I'm not taking a shaving. And I'm realizing this sole is far more out of flat than it should be. So we're going to have to address that. You can use some winding sticks to check on it and make sure where are you high, where are you low, where are the twists in it. And the winding sticks exaggerate that. So I could then come in with my jointer plane, and I'm going to go basically from corner to corner to try and take the little bit of twist that's out of it. It only took a couple shavings to do that. And then once I get the twist out and I know it's flat, then I'm going to keep taking full shavings, full width, full clean shavings on all the way across it, making sure that I have a nice smooth surface and every point on this is coplanar. Now we're going to go back to the wedge and we're going to do a little bit of carving on this. The original one that came with it had an interesting little carving design, so I thought I would try and duplicate that. That requires a couple cross-cut marks that are just there for decoration, and they look good. And I thought that's kind of cool. Then I'm going to come into the gouge and make these little gouge marks that run parallel to each other in between the decorative saw cuts. It's a really interesting little design, nothing special to it, and I don't think there's any particular historical importance to it, but it's kind of fun. And it's a good chance to try something freehand. And if you looked at the original, it wasn't a beautiful job. Someone just quickly punched it out in a couple minutes and made something that looked interesting. The lines weren't perfectly straight and weren't perfectly clean, but it was a hand-done job, and I really like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can see this iron is really dull, so we need to address that. And I thought, let's just take it over to my extra coarse stone and see where we're at. And after this one, I realized that this is going to need a lot of work. I ended up spending probably a good 10 minutes total on this, flattening it and regrinding that bevel. I took a lot of material off it, but it's amazing what you can do with some 50, or I think this is 36 grit sandpaper. Put it on a piece of glass, and you can grind through it really quickly. Go back into the coarse, and then we can then take it over into the actual diamonds. We are working on the back as well because it needed a little bit of work. Total, I think, from bunching it in my hand to having this razor sharp was probably about 10 minutes total. Most of that was the grinding time, probably somewhere around 6 to 7 minutes of grinding time. Put it on the strop, nice, clean, shiny surface. Put the chip breaker back on it, and now we can put it in and see how everything works, because this is something we've never tried before. We don't know if it actually works out. I want to make sure that iron comes in, and the first pass was jamming, and I had to do a bit of adjustment. The chip breaker needed a little bit of cleanup on it, but after some adjustment, now it's taking nice shavings. And this is actually a lot of fun. I think I went through about an inch of the board just taking these curls, and you see how they just come out. This was fun. This was a serious amount of fun. I really enjoyed it. After that, we can go to the boiled linseed oil. Yes, this is homemade boiled linseed oil. I have several videos on making it myself. It is fun, and for something like this, you just put it on and let it soak up. I didn't put much paste wax onto this, other than some of the surfaces. I covered the chip breaker and the wedge a little bit, but mostly I just let it absorb as much boiled linseed oil as it wants. Put some on every day for the first couple days, and then once a week for a couple weeks after that. So yeah, there you go. We have a Cooper's plane, and I'm looking forward to experimenting with this, learning some, and maybe doing some coopering. Who knows what the future holds, but it's going to be fun.
So there you have it, a Cooper's plane. This is one that is kind of fun, and I want to do a few things with it. I haven't actually learned how to use it, and that's one of the things that I want to do, and in order to do that, you have to have one. So that was one of the things I wanted to get this for. I have a few more things I want to learn along the way, and so maybe we'll be doing some coopering in the future. I have a few other Cooper's tools I need to get, but yeah, this is one that kind of confuses some people. It's not a jointing plane, even though it's really long. And the one thing is the sole doesn't have to be perfectly flat, because you're usually putting a curved stave on it. So it's a rather forgiving plane. And yes, it is intended to be used upside down. You hold it up and you run your boards over it. This was an enjoyable one to do, and learned a few things on it, and I liked actually getting it up and running again. So if you would like to see me do some coopering, let me know that down in the comments down below. If there's something particular you'd like me to make, let me know that. Maybe I'll be doing some more videos on exactly what this is and how to use it once I actually get some chance to play with it and learn a little bit more. So yeah, I hope you like it. If you did, let me know in the comments down below. Thank you. That means a lot. I do learn a lot from that, and it helps me grow as well as helping the channel grow, because every time you put a comment down below, it's worth putting 10 likes on the page. So thank you for that. It means more than I can say, and comments do make my day. If you want to take it even farther, there are a bunch of names over here, and those are all of the patrons on Patreon, because without patrons or members on the channel, we wouldn't exist. We are completely sponsored by you guys. Thank you for that. It means more than I can say, and between you guys, you are the ones keeping us going. If you'd like to find out more about that, there are links to that down below, or you can click the member or join button down here, and thank you. We do have special perks for both, and I want to say hi to everyone who's currently watching. If you want to do that, think about becoming a patron. I think that'll do it for now, and until next time, have a wonderful day. So this is a Cooper's plane, and the reason it's called a Cooper's plane is because D.B. Cooper, he robbed a plane, and it was a big one.